Someone says, "What's the future?" Vaughn Coleman.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. What's going on, guys? Welcome back. Yes, this is our third Vaughn Coleman Presents this week. And it's funny enough, so the last episode and then the next episode, both are guys I met at Garden State Comic Fest. So, this year, a lot of great people, and I'm hoping to have even more people that I met this year. One of the great things about the show is the networking, right? It's always a good time. It's always fun. And what's interesting is I love when you have such an interesting array of people at Garden State Comic Fest, but we can get into that. But before we do, always, I like to lead with myself, get me out of the way, and then we'll get to the guest, of course. So I have my comic book, which is available now on Fund My Comic, which that site is currently down, Indiegogo, and Kickstarter. So let me pull that up right here. So my comic book is called Phenomenova. It has raised over $14,000. And at 15K, we will get a stretch goal. It's across 3 different platforms. So it's set 20 years after World War III and follows the idealistic son of a war hero as he strikes out on his own to become a superhero inspired by his father's legacy. So there are 5 total covers for this book. I'm going to update this one a little bit, but here's just a sneak peek at what it will look like with logos. So definitely make sure that you're checking this book out. It is almost done. All the interior colors are done. So if you like that, I will put the link in the description and also in the chat. But enough about me, guys. All right, you see me all the time. Let me bring in my guest. Please welcome Daemon Manx. How's it going?
Hey, Vaughn. How you doing, man? That was a great intro. I was jamming out to that.
Awesome. I'm glad to hear it. Let me go ahead and put that in the chat. So you... we're right across, or like, I guess diagonal from me at Garden State Comic Fest. And it wasn't until the end I was like, oh, let me, check out this guy's stuff. And so you write horror books.
Yeah, I'm a horror author. I've always been like into that Twilight Zone kind of thing. These horror stories that make you like, oh, well, yeah, what if that could actually happen? I like things that make you think. And I've been writing horror for a while now, trying to build momentum with it. And it was cool seeing you at the Garden State. But like we were both so busy, we didn't get a chance to talk till the very end.
Yeah, which
was awesome.
It's a good sign. Yeah, that's the thing. I'd rather that than there are shows where it's just a ghost town, or often, like, especially those celebrity oriented shows where there's just lines for celebrities and then everyone else is just kind of no one browses for new stuff. So I like when people are actually looking for new content to check out. And I always it's your books look, by the way, I love the covers of your books. I'll pull them up. But before we get into that, so the Twilight Zone stuff, that's awesome. But how did you get into writing?
Well, everybody goes, oh, yeah, I've been writing since I was a kid. And yeah, maybe that was true. Like I dabbled writing as a kid. My mother was a journalist. It's always been in my blood. But like, my early years, I was a bass player in a band and I was writing lyrics for the songs. And, we were playing the city. We're playing the bitter end on like Tuesday nights, playing down at CBGB's on like Wednesday nights, and I had the aspirations of, taking that musical dream as far as it could go. And it was awesome. Like I have such great memories of those times playing those clubs and did it for years. In my later life, things took a turn for the worse. And it wasn't until I actually saw like a really strong glimpse at the dark side of life as to when I really got into writing. It's actually, I needed writing to actually save me from this place I was headed. I opened the doors there.
Oh, awesome.
That's called a segue right there.
No, let's hear it. Yeah, I mean, if you're
Hey,
open to it.
yeah, no, definitely. So, let's just preface this that I have almost 12 years clean and sober from heroin
Oh,
addiction. I was addicted to heroin for nearly 5 years, and I lost everything due to that. People become addicted for many reasons.
mhm.
I got injured on the job. I tried painkillers, and it just like it led me down this dark path. But it wasn't the rock bottom. Um, my addiction brought me places I never thought it would, and because addicts are known for making such great decisions, I found facing a 10-year prison sentence, and I ended up spending 8 years in the prison system where I did get clean and sober, where I started studying to get my associate's degree. That's also where I once again found my passion for writing, and writing and school and trying to do the right thing actually saved my life while I was in the system, because it's where I started doing the right thing, and I found like, creativity can just save you. Like that creative outlet is something that you really need when you're struggling through the early days of addiction, or going through a dark time like prison or depression, isolation, where you feel like you are hopeless. And I found hope in writing, and a lot of my best sellers have were written in the prison system. Like my first book that came out called Abigail was written in a dark place, and it did really well when it came out. But yeah, essentially, prison is the catalyst that got me back into following my dream and becoming a horror author.
Well, I mean, that's great to hear that. I mean, I love hearing these kinds of stories. Everyone has one, and to have, but that, I mean, that's such a great story that it totally lifted you from it. And I remember I was browsing your stuff before this, and this cover, I mean, I love a lot of these covers, but this cover might be one of my favorites. I don't
Abigail.
even know what it's about. Yeah, because Abigail is just a girl's name, but it's such a minimalist but striking cover. But I mean, hearing about that is so inspiring that you had to write your way out of something, and sometimes that's what you have to do. Honestly, it's a weird thing. It's almost like people find a deeper reality in fiction, I find.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And with me, so much of real life pours out onto the page when I'm creating fiction. It's not just fiction. I'm not like just, oh, let's make that up. I'm drawing on life experiences and memories and emotions, and they're all coming out on the page. And that's, if the reader picks up on that, then that's that's the double bonus points that I get as an author. You know
Absolutely.
that that one right below it, The Dead Girl, is actually a short story. Uh, but it was my second story that got published, but it's about a couple that are struggling with an addiction, and it shows the darkness of addiction, and it shows the tragic outcome that most addicts ultimately end up at. It's not a story generally of hope, but it's a story that definitely shows the consequences of addiction.
Absolutely. And it looks like it's free.
Uh, yeah. Well, you know what? I think Godless was doing it for free. I don't think they're doing it anymore. But if anybody wants a copy of that, I'm always down to send out a free copy of The Dead Girl to anybody who wants it. All they have to do is reach out to me on the either the Damon Manx website or the Last Waltz, and I'll send an EPUB out for free, and anybody can check out that short story.
I'm definitely interested in that. Um, I remember getting into kind of a short story phase when I was in college. I'm just reading them, and I'd love to eventually, fix my attention span, which has been shot, and start reading novels again. And it seems like these might be a great place to start. I mean, this stuff looks incredible, and
So was this the first one you wrote, or was it, or was it said Abigail was the?
So Abigail is about 50 pages long. That's the first one that got published. The first short story that I wrote is a short story called Devlin's Manse, which is actually featured in a book called These Lingering Shadows. Right there, that's
Oh,
it.
okay.
Actually, that's an anthology I put together with several other horror authors. And the Devlin's Manse is kind of your straight up. Not really straight up, but it's your ghost story. It's your haunting in an old house, but the main characters are children, so you've got that kind of twist going on in there. And that was the first one I wrote. I think the first one that I really got any notice on was The Dead Girl, and then Abigail got nominated for a Splatterpunk Award and got nominated for a Horror Authors Guild Award, which was surprising because it was like my first. It was a little 50-page novelette that I got a publishing deal on right out the door, which was pretty damn rewarding coming out of prison. And you know, even though it was a a indie press that went belly up, it was still very rewarding to get it out there.
I mean, looking at it, I mean, it's interesting because I find a million things to distract me from my day to day, and I feel like almost, and maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like if being somewhere in prison, right, almost allows you to be alone with your thoughts and be hyper focused. Is that? Did you feel that way, or?
Yeah, yeah, and you need to because there's so much time. Like that's what prison is. It's time. And it's
Mhm.
time to either do the right thing or it's time to do the wrong thing. You get that time to really reflect and that can eat you alive if
Mhm.
you let it. There's a saying that they say they're saying do the time, don't let the time do you.
Oh, I've
So
never heard that.
yeah, so I mean, if you let the time do you, you're constantly looking at the clock like, "Oh my god, 10 years to go until I get out of here," and "Oh my god, what's everybody doing? No one loves me." Easy to fall into that hole. Um, but if you have something to project yourself into, pour your emotions into. Take the emotions, put them on paper. A lot of guys draw. A lot of guys are into the art there, and they spend the hours away drawing pictures and portraits and doing cards and doing that. Other guys study and study and study, and I spent my time reading and writing and dreaming to be a horror author. I actually was formulating a master plan on how I was going to execute the actual becoming of a horror author when I got out. And up until now I've been following that step by step. In fact, this year kind of brings me to the second to last step that I had planned out over 4 years ago. Well
Wow.
over 4 years ago.
I mean, the amount of stuff you've accomplished in such a short amount of time, really, when you think about it, is just it's crazy. And it's just, I guess it's about being hyper focused and getting in the right mindset. I'll have, I think people get bogged down. I know I do. Like marketing on social media takes up so much time. But the problem with that is you market on there, and then while you're in the app, you scroll a bunch of million things, and then suddenly there goes your writing time. But you've somehow found a way to really hunker down and get so much out there.
With the one you're looking at right now, this is what's coming out now. This is called the Oceanox series. Now, it's 4 books, and I wrote all of these 4 books in a 6 month period of time, and it's in fact, I'll show you if this is how thick this
Holy crap. All right.
yeah.
So I'm gonna kill my I always have excuses to not write. I'm gonna kill those right now. That's inspired me. I mean, that is crazy how you managed to do that. How did you manage to churn out that many books in that amount of time?
Yeah, so check this out. Well, I've been first we'll start. So 4 years ago, January of 2020, I get to the halfway house and all right, I'm gonna go to college and I'm gonna finish up my associate's degree. that's the plan, because when you're in the halfway house, you can either leave to go to work or go to college. And I start college and I get through a couple months and COVID hits,
Oh,
shuts down the halfway house, 277 guys in the halfway house, and COVID's already in the building. So like everybody's getting sick, and it was a disaster. But I was either going to go insane at that point, or I was going to find something to do. And I had this little word processor, and it was battery operated. You could see like 3 lines of type, and it saved like 8 files at a time. And one night I sat down with it and I started writing what I thought would be a short story. And about 5 hours later, I'm like, this is not a short story. I had no idea what it was going to be, but I realized, I'm like, this is massive. This is huge. And over the next 6 months, I would write from 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. nonstop, filling up all 8 files of the word processor. Then the next day, they let me in the halfway house's library to put it on a zip drive so I could transfer it. And it was a mess. But by the time I was ready to leave on Halloween of 2020, I typed the words "the end" and I had 520,000 words written of this monster of a book,
the
bigger
short story.
this short story, bigger than Stephen King's The Stand, bigger than it. It's like Game of Thrones size book, and and then I got released. I got released early due to COVID, so I came home and I let it sit for a while. I let it sit for 6 months, and
Mhm.
then I opened up the zip drive like 6 months later, and I looked at it like, and I'm like, who wrote this mess? This is this is bad. Like it was jumbled because I could only see 3 lines. So like, I'm repeating myself. It's redundant.
Mm.
There's typos. There's like plot holes. Huge, terrible things. So I
I
spent
hear that.
I spent the next 4 years. I chopped out 120,000 words, which
Oh yeah.
is which is a novel. I chopped out a full novel of it. I've had 2 editors work on it. I've had like 8 proofreaders, and I've just been revising it for 4 years. And now, to the best of my ability, book one comes out on Tuesday of next week. It's called
Good.
Scream in the Dark. And for
Is
me,
there
it's the story I always wanted to write, and it's so rewarding for this to actually happen.
That's awesome. Let me go ahead and pull that. Where's the best? Is there a way people can pre-order it?
Yeah, well, you can pre-order this from um, multiple spots. You can pre-order it on Amazon. You can pre-order it at Barnes and Noble. If you want a signed copy of it, I happen to have some signed copies of it, and you can get those at
All right, let me
lastwaltzpublishing.com.
go ahead and share those links. So in the chat, lastwaltzpublishing.com if you want a signed copy. Um, I mean, that's incredible. It's funny because I wrote, and now I almost feel like rewriting. What do you think it's scarier, writing or rewriting? Because I almost feel like I wrote when my comic book, and then I wrote the first 8 issues, and I had a similar thing where I came back after a year to issue because I'm like, oh, issue 1 is good. I've rewritten it 1,000 times. All right, now I remember being confident in issue 2, and then I looked at it and I was like, oh boy, oh boy,
Yeah.
I'd be
Oh
like,
boy.
why is this scene here? Why does it take 10 pages to get to the point? What is going on? And then I'd be like, well, issue 3 was incredible. And then I'm looking at it and I'm like, it was incredible for my abilities at the time. But I mean, I think just getting stuff out there and then stepping away from it really makes you a better writer. Now, it is nice when I find those things where I'm like, oh, okay, I wasn't all bad. But like you said, I think I always say this, it's okay to write redundant scenes. It's not okay to publish them. You know,
Yeah, yeah,
they're like,
exactly. Yeah.
it's okay. I always like, I remember when I first sent my a script to a professional writer, he was like, okay, why is this 80 pages? I was like, well, what do you mean? He goes, I go, oh, because I just write more and then I'll edit down later. He goes, yeah, these 30, basically 30 pages to get to the point. You can't do that to someone, you know? And if anyone who reads an early writer scripts, they're godsends, especially if they're harsh. The worst thing you could do to someone who wants to take writers seriously, I always say this, is tell them that their garbage is good. You can't do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
You can't do that to someone you care about. You can do that to if it's someone you don't really want to talk to. You can absolutely do that. But
Yeah, you're not doing them a service by just appeasing them. Oh yeah, yeah, it's great, it's great.
all right, signed copies here, and then where else can you get them?
All right, so you can order the ebook at Amazon, also,
Okay,
so Amazon.com.
I've heard of that
You
website.
you know that place?
Yeah, I've heard of it.
Also, Barnes and Noble online, you can order it. I know if I go on, I can probably drum up a link here for you too.
Oh yeah, send
Yeah,
me whatever, and
I can.
oh,
I
here we
think
go.
I got a universal link that'll take you to both.
So I'm so interested in your process and everything, and I do want to get to what the actual book itself is about. I've just been so fascinated by your story and the writing process, and because I mean, this is just I remember you were telling me in person, you're like, "Yeah, I wrote these in 6 months." I'm like, 6 months? Like that's crazy. And what people don't realize, I love when people go, "Oh man, how did you write 4 books that close together?" It's like, no, man, everything's cooking. What you have to realize is when you're seeing movies that come out close together. No, they're not. It's not like, for example, it's not like a TV show comes out. Oh, I think we lost him. All right, well he'll come back. I think. All right, that was. Hang on, this did not paste properly. There we go.
Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. It happens. I've accidentally left during my own show, and my guests were like, "What do I do?" But I'm really interested in seeing what this book is about. Because it looks great. Ojanox. Is that how it's pronounced? Ojanox?
Yeah, Ojanox. Yeah, yep.
So tell me, what's Ojanox about?
All right, so I hear the elevator pitch. It's The Thing meets It. So
Ooh.
yeah, so it's 1979. All right, there's no technology, there's no internet, there's no cell phones. Isolated mountain town in New York State. It's the week before Halloween. Kids are getting ready. Like this town does Halloween. Everybody's got their decorations up. You know, the kids are having a Halloween party. Opening scene is a line worker who's, he's out inspecting lines and he's taking a break. And, your first murder happens within 2 pages. And then we go across town to Troy Fisher, who's spent the whole week building a haunted house in his garage for his party that he's having. And his mom is hosting the party. And there's 10-year-olds at this party, and his mom's telling a Halloween story. But a couple of Troy's friends couldn't show up to the party because they've been sick with the flu. A pretty severe case of the flu, too. Now, Troy takes his friends through the haunted house. And at the end, when he's cleaning up, after they've gone home, he goes back inside and there's someone inside the house. And he looks, and it's a boy in his pajamas and bare feet. And it's his friend Rob, who couldn't make it to the party. And Rob tries to attack Troy and then starts having seizures and ends up in the hospital. And then the shit hits the fan. This, whatever it is that Rob has, starts spreading. The bodies start dropping. The whole series takes place in a 5-day period leading up to Halloween, from an ancient evil that's been unearthed that is consuming the town people, mutating them into something like you've never seen before. There's so much going into what this creature actually is. It's ancient. It's responsible for many things that have happened throughout the course of history. And Gary Grove is just the latest latest course on its menu. We've got great characters in there. We've got the town sheriff who's a Vietnam vet. Uh,
Mhm.
we've got Troy and his classmates who are the kids bringing a little coming of age story. But as this thing grows, it's not a book for kids. This is brutal. It's bloody, but like I always wanted to capture that Halloween story. Like when I was a kid, those Halloween stories, like they gave you the suspense and they gave you the atmosphere and they gave you the tension, and that's what the Oceanok story does. It's that Halloween mystery that we wanted to read when we were kids that I'm bringing to the reader now, and I'm delivering it in a fast paced modern day telling, but bringing it back to the old school horror of 1979. I say it meets The Thing. It's also got a taste of Stephen King's The Stand and Stranger Things.
That sounds awesome. I have to confess, I don't know The Stand. I know of it. I've heard of it, but I
Yeah,
don't know much about it. But I know that is is that his longest book?
that's his longest book. The Stand is about a super flu that breaks out of a government lab and wipes out 99% of the world population. And there's survivors left scrambling. So it's got the biological medical element, which the Oceanox has a biological medical element to it. I had to do a lot of research in this. I had to research police procedures, pathology, medical examination, uh, World War II and Vietnam, along with the Lenni Lenape tribe from the New York, New Jersey area. So there's a lot.
Is
There's a
that what
lot
Ojanox
into it.
is?
No, not really. No, the Oceanox. I can't tell you what it is. Essentially, the
It's a made
Oceanox
up
is
word though. Of
it's a made up word. So Lois Fisher, and can I read you something?
course.
All right. So Lois Fisher, she's an English major who is Troy's mother, um, and she is one of the stars of our show. And she starts off the chapter one by reading a ghost story that she kind of wrote in college, but is kind of embellishing upon on the spot. And this is what I wrote 4 years ago, the very first night. Probably wrote a lot more. It's been edited quite a bit. Lois Fisher sat cross legged at the large coffee table with the focused attention of 10 fourth graders hanging on her every word. She slid the candle toward her and leaned forward, allowing the delicate flame to cast dancing shadows across her face. Meeting the stare of each child for a brief second, Lois paused for dramatic effect. Then she dropped her voice an octave and began to speak. There is a presence delivered on the breeze that only shows itself on Halloween. You feel it in the shiver crawling up your spine and hear it in the rustle of fallen leaves. A menacing darkness has entered the town and it knows where you live. It lurks in the shadows, it hides in the woods, waiting for you to take the shortcut through the graveyard. It holds no physical form but watches through the eyes of the jack o' lantern as you make your way home from school. It circles from above, waiting for you to trip and lose your footing. Then it strikes. Lois raised her voice and slapped her hand against the coffee table, causing a chorus of gasps to erupt from the entranced group of children. She paused once again, then continued. Like a raven seizing a shrew, you fight to breathe as you struggle to escape its grip. But it's too late. You succumb to its gravity, paralyzed with fear, and may never know the beast by name, for it has many names, and it is older than time itself. Only then will you understand what has been delivered on the breeze. Only then will you know the beast by name. You say it with your dying breath. Oceanox.
That's cool. So the professor is telling the kids this in class?
It's his mother telling him at a Halloween party. So she's making up a story, and then the kids hear the story and start using the name Oceanox
Ojanox. Okay.
to describe what's going on in the town.
That's
Yeah.
cool.
Because the Ojinok sounds like something old school. That sounds awesome. Definitely
So I
got me interested.
first I wanted to come up with a monster that's never been done before,
That's a
and
tall order always.
it is a tall order. This is a monster that might just explain the myth behind every monster ever created.
Ooh.
Ah, and I also wanted to come up with a name that's never been used before. So I
Mhm.
started arranging letters together. I'm like, and I just found some that looked cool,
Mhm.
and I put those together. There was a U in it originally, like OUJA, but it looked like Ouija board.
Legionox, yeah.
Yeah, so I had that. Then I just started rearranging them and finally came up with this, and,
Making up words is fun. It's
it
really fun.
is, yeah, yeah, so I just had a ball, and then, there's been so much that's gone into this. I've been with, the cover artist to because I had the vision of all 4 of these covers, in my head, so I had to find the right cover artist to come up with all of these.
Mhm.
Christy Aldrich was my partner on this in every sense of the word, and she totally hit the nail on the head with all these covers. Um, she also did illustrations inside the book. I have other uh, illustrators who worked on some of the inside illustrations as well, and even like the little things, like the scene breaks. They're all that big O of the Oceanox mouth.
I
They're
like
they're
yeah, I
that
one of the things I liked is that each cover looks distinct, but you could
right.
see that the same thing kind of redone. Hold on a second.
Yeah.
Let me
Um,
see it. Wait, let me see it
all
again.
right. Let me get to one of those. So this is like the chapter heading where you have
Ooh, I
the
like that.
mouth. Then when you get to the scene breaks, like it's all right. So and then we've got all kinds of I if I could see and do this,
There you
got all kinds of illustrations, and then for the little scene breaks, we have just the 3 mouths rather than like those little asterisks, you know. Those are
go.
all little
Wow, I like
mouths with
that.
the teeth in there.
I like that a lot. I like the covers again too. So when you were writing it, because it's funny, you said a short story. Um,
Yeah,
at first,
in theory. Well,
at what point did you realize it was four, and how did you break it down into four?
it was this essentially this is one story. This is
Mhm.
one long story. And then when I saw the size of it, I said, well, this can never be one book. I mean, it's massive. It's 1,200 pages altogether. Um, People are not reading those kind of books, and
Mhm.
I said, well, I at least have to break it into 4. I looked at the possibility of 2, and even to me 2 seemed like just too thick. So
Oh yeah,
I
that's
I
big.
went through it, for the reader. Yeah, there's cliffhangers. Like there's some Empire Strikes Back cliffhangers in this.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
That's smart. So no
yeah.
wonder you're so you're that's a smart thing too to break it up because I think I remember when I was like, ah, I'll do all the chapters at once. And while that's cool, there's something about building anticipation. Like for example, I'm watching a show, X-Men 97, right? I have the show watching it now, it's already all done. But I'm choosing to wait and watching it a week at a time.
Mhm,
Um
mhm.
maybe I'll change it. Maybe I'll concede. But there's something about build because it's almost like building a fan base. You want people to go, oh my God, what's gonna happen next? Let's talk online. That's because I remember obviously I wasn't born when Empire came out, but it's so cool looking back and hearing stories or seeing people leaving the theaters like those live footage. It's like he's got to be. It can't be real, Like I love seeing that stuff where people. Does that excite you? That possibility that people are going to be freaking out and
Yeah.
and speculating, and you just kind of have that you can have that smug look, like, yeah,
Well,
I
I
know what I'm doing.
and already so I've had an art team on this. I've had some people who've gotten early releases of it, and then I always get, "Oh my god, I know what it is. I know what this." And I'm like, I haven't had one person who guessed anything even close to what's going to happen in this book. There's twists in this one that you're going to be like, what? And even up until the very end, I'm just gonna. You think you know what's going on? I'll pull that rug right out from under you. But Empire, when I saw it, it pissed me off so much. Like the first I walked out of Empire Strikes Back, I'm like, I can't believe they did that to me. I'm like, what's gonna happen? You know. And now it's like my favorite of the trilogy, the early trilogy.
It tends
So
to happen.
yeah, and so I'm hearing a lot of theories. It's exciting right now. Of course, now it's the nervous knots because Tuesday, book one comes out. Scream in the Dark comes out on Tuesday. I This is over 4 years in the making, and when I tell you, like, my life is in this book, it really is. So Troy Fisher is hosting a Halloween party, and the haunted house that he builds in his basement is called Scream in the Dark.
Mm-hmm.
When I was in fourth grade, I hosted a very similar Halloween party and built a haunted house in my garage, which was also called Scream in the Dark. So the characters in this book, a lot of them are inspired by influential people in my life. There's backstories in here of things that have happened to me that I've put in the book. There's just and you know, it gives you a taste without going fully into 1979. It gives you a taste of what it was like to be alive during that time period because it was very different. You know, like some people were even more intolerable than some are now. Like there were bad dudes back then, and you know, we meet some of these guys, and we instantly dislike them. But you know, they were smoking in the hospitals back then.
Yeah.
They weren't wearing seatbelts. That seatbelt, what the hell is that? You know,
Uh-huh.
people
It's
were
so
riding in the
interesting.
front of cop cars with them. You know,
Oh, that, yeah. All right. See, I got to look out for more details like that. But it's like, I remember reading something that came out in the 80s and like, oh, you're 18, you're old enough to drink. And I was like, what do you mean? He's old. And I'm like, oh. And that's always,
yeah.
that kind of stuff is always great.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a little taste of the nostalgia, but the biggest thing for me setting it in 1979 was to take away technology because you know
Hmm.
uh,
It ruins stories.
you can't if you can call for help, man. That
Or the internet.
already yeah, the internet or a cell phone. I can't have it. Also, I wanted this first batch of 4 books to end in 1979 because when I revisit the Oceanox universe,
Oh.
I would like it to be in maybe 1989.
Ooh, that's
Yeah.
so you've already got, so this wasn't enough for you. Have you started writing the next ones or no?
I'm still cultivating the idea for the next ones or where they're at. I think there's actually a comic book in the future,
Awesome.
which
I was about to ask you about that. Would you consider adapting this into a comic book or no?
I would love to. And I'd also my dream is for so you want to hear if you don't pronounce your dreams to the universe, they don't happen.
Yeah,
So I would like Mike Flanagan to pick this up and make this a Netflix series.
that'd be awesome.
Flanagan, if you're listening, we'll go with other directors though. But I would love to adapt this into either graphic novels or maybe a couple short comics. See where they go. But
Well, if you
that's
need
still yeah. We'll talk. Yeah.
absolutely. I know I have some connection. Listen, I mean, obviously you got the writing stuff down. One of the things that's cool though, because I've written in multiple formats, is I love writing in different mediums because you have to learn that inherently you will lose stuff in every medium. So that's why when people always go, "Oh, uh, the adaptation had to change things, so the story's not the same." I disagree. I think a direct adaptation is different enough inherently because, for example, when you're translating a film, there are part and what I love about books or when I do read them or short stories is the writer can just go off on tangents that aren't really tangents because they could stream of consciousness. You can't do that in a film. You
No.
can't do that in a film. You have to get to the next shot. Comics are interesting too because you can't have people moving around like you have to give them the illusion of moving around, but like when I would translate screenplay ideas to comics it was different, so I'm sure it'll be fascinating. But you said comic book in the future, would that mean potentially of Ojanox
Um.
or
Well,
something
when
else?
I say the future, I mean making this series into a comic book,
That would be awesome.
doing it in the future. But I would love to see a direct adaptation of this made into a comic book. It would be
Yeah.
a lot of comic book, that's for sure. I
Why
probably
not?
need to talk to somebody really because there's so many characters, there's so many. We're here, we're there, we're here, we're there. Kind of jumping
Mhm.
around, bird's eye view of a whole entire town. So we're getting a clear picture, but through a lot of people's eyes. But there's
Mine too.
yeah.
Mine.
We'll
Yeah.
definitely have to.
Yeah. Let's talk.
I'd like to talk to you more about it. To
Yeah.
what
I
can be done, what should be done.
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of stuff. I learned too that, like, for example, there was a bunch of characters. There's a scene of a superhero team that appears in one scene in my comic. But I had specific visions of them. Character designs, I learned, is something that because if you don't like the way a character looks and they're going to be around for a while, you got to make sure you like how they look because they'll stick around. Creature designs, it's so cool seeing how many people like I can do that. And yeah, I mean drawing locations, but here's the thing, that's always going to be cheaper than finding an actor and then getting a whole set for like if you want a scene, I'd write screenplays and they'd be like, "All right, Vaughn, you want this scene? That's this much." I'm like, "Oh, hell no." You know what? It's not that important. But what's great about a novel, just write it, It's the most economic form of storytelling because it's just a man in his imagination. But seeing it come to life is something really special, and neither negates the other. There's a reason why people can analyze movies. How often do you hear them reference the novelization of it? Because they can put stuff you can't put in a 2-hour runtime.
The only people I hear doing that are voracious readers and authors.
Yeah,
Who are always talking about but
the
the
novelization.
laymen are definitely talking the movie for sure.
Yeah. But I mean, that would be awesome. And a long-running horror story set over 5 days. I mean, people want what happens next. They want to know. I can just even not having read it, imagining because I imagine, and you probably won't answer, but I imagine there's some shape shifting involved. Given you said the thing, and I'm also you mentioned cliffhangers. I mean, I'm imagining you keep a story like that going, and you want them dying to know what happens next. That's a hit. There's the worst thing. I remember Mike Barron, he's a great writer, told me this, that like the most important thing is the reader want to know what happens next. And
Definitely.
I imagine that you must have reread this a lot. And it sounds like you got proofreaders, which is one of the most important things a writer can do is have, be able have almost the humility to be like, all right, what do you think? And take notes on it. And that's great. And it sounds like you've got a hit on your hands. I mean, everything you're describing is cool. I'm big into cryptids. Are you big into cryptids?
Yeah, I do. I don't write enough about cryptids, but everything that you love about a cryptid
Is here.
is here.
All right.
And if you needed a reason to say, well, how did all these cryptids ever how did they come to be? Or if they are all myths, where did the myth come from? Where did the myth of the vampire come from? Where did the myth of Sasquatch and the werewolf and
Mothman is my favorite.
Mothman, all of these, where did this come from? And what if there was a very real reason why everything came
You're
to
speaking my
be?
language.
This is because it's man, I just want to spill the tea. I just want to tell you everything.
Know,
I can't,
yeah.
but I can't. And what I can do is I can send you a couple books.
I would love to. I'd love to take a look at them
for sure.
I'd love to. Man, it sounds great. It sounds right up my alley. I love this stuff, and that's always the tough part is advertising. This guy, he's saying myths sounds like a good premise, so he wrote a book called The Mythicals. That's why he's saying that. Yeah. No, I mean, I love that kind of stuff. It's, and that's the tough part about marketing something. When someone asks you a question that has a really cool answer in the book, you want it? Read the book, That's always the tough part. But you've got I can tell you your premise has enough intrigue that I'm already sold at it. I mean, it sounds great. I don't even read books much, but I'm going to have to, tame my ADHD and read this because I want to.
How many pages is each book?
Yeah, so book 1 is 250 pages.
Oh, that's not that bad.
It's one of the shorter of it. So that's Scream in the Dark, book 1. And you know, we're going back to the cliffhanger. Not only does the book end on a cliffhanger, but every chapter pretty much ends on a cliffhanger.
I remember
So
that.
so it's just like I really wanted that old school horror feel, like
Mm-hmm.
you guys are walking through the woods and they hear something and they're looking around and the flashlight goes out and something jumps out right in front of them and screams, and then we cut to the next scene.
Yeah, I
We leave
remember
them
I
there. Yeah.
I would do that with book. I mean, good books in general will do that. Where I'd be like, all right, one chapter before bed. And then they get to the end, and I'm like, okay, I'll read a little bit of the next chapter. All right, no more than 3 chapters, 4
Yeah.
chapters, and now you're up and you defeated the purpose of reading, which was to fall asleep. I love those kinds of stories, man.
I had a couple people who've actually read book 1 in one day just because they couldn't stop reading the chapters. So book
Mhm.
2 is a bit bigger. It's 300 and so 360 pages. Book 4, no, book 3, no, that was book 2, 359 pages. Book 3 is 427 pages. And
Wow.
then book 4 ends again being a bit shorter, like book 1 at 250 pages.
That's cool. I like the titles too. Screaming ashes to ashes, all fall down. And then Lonesome Mountain seems almost like the it just that one just is curious. And I like that each cover takes the same motif, but it just looks totally different. Is it and the fact that you said it takes place over 5 days is just fast paced, always like everything about this sounds interesting. For Wow. So I have to ask, because I haven't yet. Who are your favorite writers, and what were your biggest inspirations?
Uh, Growing up, so the one book that really, really impacted me as a kid was Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury, which was again that story of kids, Halloween time. You feel the mystery of autumn, and the carnival comes to town, and it's evil as hell, and they're doing all wicked stuff at that carnival, and the Hall of Mirrors, and it's a coming of age, but it's also a story about the father who's reflective of his time, and he's getting older, and he's really reflective of how he's aging, but his son is young. So it's got that whole dichotomy of young and old, and the pensiveness of it. It captures both thoughts, from the thought of the child to the thought of the older man, which is really cool. Then, of course, Stephen King did it for me too.
Mhm.
But like I
I haven't
read
heard of that.
Stephen King, I liked Stephen King, but Stephen King didn't make me like, hey man, I got to be a writer. Like I enjoyed it. I enjoyed Stephen King. Then when I was in prison and I'm reading a lot, I started reading Stephen King's son, Joe Hill,
Mhm.
and Joe Hill actually made me say, I've got to I've got to write horror. Like
Mhm.
he had a short story collection, 20th Century Ghost, that was so unique in short storytelling, it made me want to write a short story collection. So Joe Hill is responsible for me becoming a writer. Stephen King's responsible for me being a reader. Ray Bradbury is responsible for me being enthralled with the idea of the perfect novel, and Clive Barker, Chuck Palahniuk,
Ooh.
all those guys. Like, oh, I read Fight Club in like 2 days. I just
Mm.
tore through that book. I loved it, and then I wrote read Haunted, which that was Haunted and Choke, and really loved those books.
Now I hate to be that guy, but is the movie adaptation of, because I just looked up, I've never heard of I know Ray Bradbury obviously, but I'd never heard of Something Wicked Comes This Way. Is the movie adaptation any good? Because I've never
It,
heard of it.
it's really really close. It's a Disney film, so it's a little
Happy,
it's
imagine.
well, I wouldn't say it's happy. It's pretty dark for a Disney film, but it's pretty good. It's pretty. it's a classic, that's for sure. It's tamed by it's not you're not going to get the Terrifier out of it.
Mhm.
It's tamed by today's standards, but it's a good one. It's a must see. It's the For a lot of newer readers, the book is too descriptive, too atmospheric, too older in writing. But I think for the purists, it's an essential. If I was teaching a reading and writing class,
It would be
that
on there.
that would be the first book everyone reads.
Gotcha. That sounds like a good one. And Joe, because what was his name? Joe Hill.
Joe Hill, yeah.
Yeah. So Joe Hill, I think he wrote Lock and Key, if I remember correctly, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Because
he
I
did.
haven't read that, but I have heard
Yep.
that that is a masterpiece.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. And he's got the graphic novels of Lock and Key that he did, and they
mhm.
have the series on either Prime or Netflix.
Yeah, I think in Netflix. I haven't watched it yet. Um, I've been too busy. But
Yeah,
I
imagine
gotta
that.
feed the creative side every once in a while, Um, but yeah, I would say all right, so we got favorite books. So I wanted to ask you about, did you ever by any chance, this might be a reach, but did you ever get into Harlan Ellison's writing?
No, I didn't.
All right,
No.
because he was one of the guys. For some reason, I felt this itch. All right, one of the greatest short horror stories ever, is "I Have No Math and I Must Scream." I think it's one of the most influential, and that was one of those ones that I decided to. I don't know why, just on a whim. It's funny. People tell you you have to read this, and oftentimes I feel like the more that happens, sometimes it works, but sometimes you just get that itch out of
Yeah.
nowhere and decide to scratch it. And I remember reading it, and I was just blown away. And then I learned that he wrote it in one night, and that inspired. I'm like, you know what? I'll do that. And sometimes that's what I think I like about novels is I don't have to worry about handing it like the screenplay. You have to worry about the production. You have to worry about, or comics you have to worry about the artist. What I like about the kind of writing you're doing is it's so pure. It really is. In this, and not to say that other forms aren't, but that it's just this is what you get. It's pure. Everything is coming from you. The story just flows out of you, and there's something about just sitting down and reading a story that I love. But yeah, I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. I can't recommend highly enough. One of the greatest sci-fi horror stories ever written, and it's really short. It's like 14 pages, I think. Um, Definitely, not super uplifting, although I'd argue there's some uplifting stuff that people look over. So I'm curious, what are your favorite movies?
Ooh. Well, Jaws was
Oh,
definitely one of my favorites.
do you think it's
That
better than the book? Because I've never read the book.
um yeah, I think the movie's better than the book.
That's a rare thing for
Yeah.
people to say, but I think most people say it about Jaws.
Yeah, yeah, there's other elements to the book that take away from it. It's very different, the book, a lot of it.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, they just the three main characters in Jaws in the movie are just were you very rarely do you get that. It was magic. It was just
Oh my god,
a
iconic.
magic moment. Yeah.
I mean, the
Um,
most important part of any story, I'd say, are the characters. I mean, there are exceptions, but like generally speaking, my favorite stories have my favorite characters, right? And I think that's why even if a story is messy, if I care enough about the characters, I can get through it. Uh, and it sounds to me like even just the way you were describing it. One of the first things I was waiting for you to finish, and then there were so many questions I forgot. But one of the things I liked about you describing is you described the sheriff, and then you say Vietnam veteran. Is your sheriff competent at his job in your story then?
oh, very much so.
Oh, I love that because
Yeah.
I'm so sick of every time the cops are the dumbest people ever in horror stories, and then the teenagers have to solve it because the
Oh
cop is
no.
an idiot.
No. I mean, well, there's a lot going on that's going unnoticed by Carl Primrose is our sheriff.
Mhm.
He's a Vietnam veteran, and he looks a little older than he really is, but going away to war at that time
Does
did
that?
did that to a lot of guys. And Carl lost the love of his life, which is actually Lois Fisher, the Troy's mother, who tells the story in the beginning. And Lois and Carl broke up right before he was sent away to Vietnam. Carl made it through Vietnam, but in war. tragic things happened to Carl that affected him, that resurface at times. Nothing that's deterred him from ever being nothing but the most proficient sheriff, like his father before him. His father was sheriff prior, and Carl, nothing. Carl wants nothing more than to do right by the people of his town, uh, and he has resigned himself to be the consummate bachelor because he pretty sure that he will never find anyone to fill Lois Fisher's shoes.
See, even right there, that I love taking that time. I think people don't realize that a lot of writing is just writing backstories, even if, and I love that. Like you know this character inside and out, and now I do too. That kind of that stuff is great. Did you have any sources of inspiration for this character that you could
Yes,
think of?
I right away. So when I was in prison, I was friends with a captain, Anthony Lorraine. Captain Anthony Lorraine received 2 silver stars, uh, serving in Vietnam. A true hero, saved countless members of his platoon. Worked recon as a sniper, and he told me much of his story. In fact, my friend Anthony told me what was his 1,000 yard stare. You know, a lot of guys, when they hear fireworks or explosions, it puts on that 1,000 yard stare that brings back the PTSD. Um, Anthony shared with me his story, what his PTSD originated from, and he allowed me to use that to become Carl's 1,000 yard stare. And it's very deep. It's a through line that goes throughout the book, and it's first told in book 2, and it comes back in book 4, but it's very impactful. Carl's demons are deep, and they're heavy, and they're real, and anybody who's been to war or has served in the military, I think I did justice to this because I spoke to guys who were there, and I used their stories to inspire the stories of the characters in this book. So nothing about that was done half-assed. It
That's
was
good.
really, yeah. And sadly, prior to us both being left out, Anthony passed away. So
Oh,
so book 4 is dedicated to the memory of Captain Anthony Lorraine.
God bless it. Yeah, I love seeing those kinds of dedications, and pulling from real life stuff is one of the most important things I think a writer can do. Is pulling from their experiences and the people around them. So, and it's just great hearing those kinds of stories. And again, it makes me more excited to read it because it's almost like you're choosing to carry on man's legacy. So yeah, it's great. I
Yeah,
think we all want our work to outlive us, and if we could carry someone else on that journey, more power to you.
yeah, definitely. And I'm bringing a lot of people on this journey with me. My mother was the consummate storyteller. Book 1 is dedicated for mom, the original storyteller, she passed away while I was in prison, so we didn't have that ending ceremonial goodbye in person. But she is like the inspiration for Lois Fisher. My mom's name was Lois,
Mhm.
so there's so much of my mom in this. There's my yeah. I really I've drawn on that, and I'm hoping I did justice to everyone who helped influence this, and I
Mhm.
certainly give them thanks in the acknowledgement section.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you can never, I wrote so many special things. I'm wondering how at what point, because you can, if you thank too many people, then it's like, well, why wasn't I thrown in? What's one more name? If you think too few, oh my God, because I thought like, oh, I wrote the story. I'll just do a thank you page. And I'm like, oh my God, well, this person helped me. I'm like, everyone helped me. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a tough part narrowing it down. So I'll have to do some editing on that, which I thought I was done writing this one. But the grind never stops, right?
No.
Um, but until it does, until you're ready for that. But even then there's promoting and there's this. But Yeah, I mean, this looks great. So July 16th is the first one, and then the next one comes out when?
August 6th.
August 6th. And then
Then the
how
third.
so is it like one a month?
Yep, one a month up until October 1st. Book 4, Lonesome Mountain, comes out October 1st, because I wanted everybody to have these books before Halloween, because
That's
it's a
cool.
the book is a build up to Halloween. So the
Makes
series
sense.
release needs to be a build up. You know, whether everybody's reading them or not by then is another story, but some will.
Yeah.
And those who come on this journey with me, I guarantee you're going to enjoy what's about to take place in the town of Garrett Grove.
I'm excited. And that must be a struggle with, and I guess it's to the extent you could argue this is a lot of things. People are in an age of instant gratification. So I'm sure when you drop the book, because most people probably won't read it in one day, although you mentioned you knew some people that would, there's going to be a period where like, come on, what are people saying anything? Are people saying anything? Are people saying anything? And so I'm sure for a novel, that must be, I'm not sure how it works in the novel world, but I imagine there must be like a waiting period where you're, you know,
So
push.
essentially, I mean, most series there's a long wait in between books, which I
Right.
did not want to do to anyone. I wanted to make it available almost instantaneously, and it's nothing is it's like 3 weeks and a couple days between each story, so it's not even like the full 4 weeks.
Mhm.
So you can get them pretty fast, and you're gonna appreciate that because books 2 and 3 are pretty thick. So if you're following this journey, you're gonna need the 3 weeks to think about it and recoup, but it's not long enough to forget what happened. So you can jump right into it.
Mhm.
And yeah, I July 27th, I'm going to be out at Barnes and Noble in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, for the very first signing of Scream in the Dark. So any friends out there in the Bethlehem, Pennsylvania area, I'm going to be at the Barnes and Noble signing copies of the Oceanox, and I'm going to have a lot of extra free swag to give away.
Awesome. My friend went there. Any more conventions? Are you going to be at Garden State Comic Fest next year?
I definitely have to go for
I'm going
sure.
to be there next year too. Okay. I
Yeah.
might hopefully because I'll actually have my full book to sell. So hopefully I'll have a whole booth. We'll talk again then. And if there's any other conventions, let me know. This has been great. You know, it's I always like having creatives of all types on my show. And immediately I was like, oh, this guy did all these horror. Let's get him on. Like, because I knew, I didn't. It's funny. We talked once, but I was like, we barely got to know each other. But I was like, this is going to be great guest. And I don't know. I just had a good feeling. And seems like I was right. I mean, this is great. It seems like you blew up on TikTok. I heard, right? Didn't you get like 1 million?
I've got a couple of TikToks with like 1.5 million views each, but I've got a good thing going on there. And I don't really do like I don't jam books down their throat. I ask musical questions. Like I get on
Mm,
and I'm like, hey, who's the greatest guitar player of all time? Or like, well, what's your favorite tune? And I've got a good, I got like 45,000 followers on there,
wow.
which isn't, by today's standards, it's not a lot, but
It's more than what I got.
I've got they all comment. So I get, some of my videos have tens of thousands of comments, and on a daily basis, they're getting couple hundred comments easily in a few hours. So I've got a dedicated fan following on TikTok, and every Wednesday night I go on live and I play rock tunes or heavy metal or whatever comes to mind. And I've been interviewing authors too, so kind of like what you're doing. So I'm doing the lives on TikTok, and
That's awesome.
and I'm working on I working on cultivating my own YouTube channel, but I haven't posted a video yet.
All right. Well, just let me know when you do. Where's so it's these are the best places everyone can follow you. Obviously, check out the books. They'll be in the description. If you have any links, send them my way. And I can add them to the description. But I have your website here. Can you get to the places to buy the book from your website?
Yeah, so I have two websites. So I mean, if you click on the books here, they're probably there's one point like yeah, there's gotta be that should take you to the last one
That takes
shot.
you to the last. But what about the other ones?
So
Amazon.
so you can't get to Amazon from my website. But I'm gonna send you links to
All right,
Amazon
gotcha. Is that
and
not
Barnes and
allowed
Noble.
or?
I just, I mean, there's Amazon kind of doesn't need my help, so I'm kind of selling the signed copies on my website.
Okay, that
So
makes sense. Well, everyone get the signed copies then if you can.
yeah, that's the one. We got books 1 and book 2 available at Last Waltz Publishing right now. The other ones are coming up real soon. So, but right now you can order all 4 books pre-order at Amazon or Barnes and Noble. And if just last week, all 4 books were in the top hot new releases on Amazon in the top 25. So, well,
And real quick, as we're because you have other work too, as we are talking about your work and your published work, you've got a lot on your sleeve. Do you have any favorites that you recommend to people, or any that you think someone who's new who might not know your stuff and isn't sure if they're ready to dive into your full work? What do you recommend they check out first?
a real easy one to try out is always Abigail. Abigail's quick 50 pages, and it comes across. It says it's a horror story. It says it's a splatterpunk. Man, it's none of that. This is never judge a book by its cover. This is a horror story like you aren't even expecting because it's really not horror. There's a message in it. You're gonna end up like I don't want to say Abigail for like you know what you can pick up Abigail the paperback for $6.66 at Amazon, and the ebook even cheaper. So it's like a no brainer. That's a great one to start. If you wanted to get a little darker though, uh, go into Our Cranium, which has an audio book that's actually a full theatrical presentation with background tracks, background music, multiple
Mm.
characters. And then my short story collection, Manxiety, has a little bit of everything. So it's got memoirs in it. It's got my time I was on Wheel of Fortune in it. It's got a motor vehicle accident I was in with a president in there. True stories. And then it's got a whole lot of horror stories in there too. So it's got a little bit of everything. So
That's awesome. That these all look great. So everyone make sure to check this out. Go to damonmanx.com and you'll be able to find all these. I definitely am interested. This cover spoke to me, but I know you said not to judge it by the cover, and I'm not judging it. I'm just intrigued. It
yes,
reminds me almost of, I'm trying to think of what posters. I guess almost like I see a bit of Alien. See, almost reminds me of that Close Encounters scene. Um, let's
yeah.
see. Hang on, is Poltergeist? What is the Poltergeist like with the
With
color scheme?
that, yeah. So check this out. So this is a little I'll give you the elevator pitch. So Abigail takes place in the South in Florida. This guy named Adrian, who's growing up in Florida as a gay man in Florida, who's been picked on his whole life. He's been marginalized, he's been bullied, and he's like at this point where he feels like he's never going to find happiness. On the night of probably the greatest date of his entire life, he comes home to find a package on his doorstep and he opens up this basket, and inside is a baby like none he's ever seen before. This baby has violet eyes and a forked tongue and horns and scales. And he sees this baby and he says, "This is the most beautiful creature I've ever seen. I will do whatever it takes to protect her." Abigail turns Adrian's life upside down in a most amazing way. And that is all I'm going to say. You want to find out what happens? Read Abigail. I guarantee it's worth it.
I'm excited to check that out. I'm excited to check all this out. You guys know where to follow him. Go to his website, check out his socials. It's just your real name on everything. Um, and I have another guest later today, so make sure you tune in because the cover artist for my last cover is going to be on. Buzz. He's been wanting to come on for so long, and it just never worked out until now. So make sure to tune in. Damon, you're welcome back anytime. I'm looking forward to checking out more of your work. All of your work, actually. I haven't technically, looked at it, but I'd love to read your work. It sounds like you've got some amazing stuff that's come out and is coming out. So thank you guys so much. He's the kind of writer that I hear stories about how much he's written, and I go,
man, I feel like writing. So I might even do that in between streams. We'll see if I allow myself the time. But until then, check out what I've already written and is coming out. Phenomenova. I'm going to play the trailer for my new comic book as it heads out. See you guys and have a great rest of your day. When the whole world was dragged into World War III, brave men like my father fought on the front lines. And they weren't alone. That was 20 years ago. Now it's up to us to carry on their legacy. And every so often, the earth from which we come gives way for something new. Something greater to be born, and with them, even greater threats to face. Bring it on! Phenomenova. For you, Dad. For you.